Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Neonfly, The Future, tonight on June 18th on Noble Demon. This album has 10 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an UK melodic power metal band. Now this record offers a sense of togetherness. All 10 tracks really feel like they belong together because they're all pulling in the same direction and they're all taking you there, perhaps with different speeds, with different tempos, but they really have a sense of starting at the same place and trying to finish exactly at the desired destination. So there's a sense of togetherness, there's a sense of working well together with one another, and there's a lot of elements that really move from one song to the next, which allows the record to have this sense of continuity from the first all the way to the last track. There's not a single song on this album that really feels like it takes you off the beaten path. You always feel like you know exactly where you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. That's the overall structure of this album, a structure that's deeply impacted by the soundscape that the record has to offer. I don't think you can talk about one without talking about the other. The soundscape of this album perhaps lacks a little bit of power. I don't think you can call this a melodic power metal record because there's just not enough power in it. There are some songs that have a little bit more bite, that have a little bit more drive, perhaps a little bit more desire, but this is definitely an album that's driven by its melodic portion of the sound. That's really the motor behind this record. It almost feels at times like you're listening to a melodic hard rock record, but it never really crosses the line into that power metal arena. It just doesn't have the strength, it just doesn't have the power, it just doesn't have the drive to be considered an album that would fall under that category. Having said all of that, the melody drives the experience. The melody becomes the main focal point of the overall atmosphere, of the overall soundscape. It's an album that is rich, that has this blanket that really covers the album well. It has a sense of growth within the songs and from track to track. It has incredible sound, incredible presence, really well defined. You can really feel all the different elements that are coming at play. It's not an album that's overly layered, but there are some layers to it, but they're easy to digest and they're easy to define because of how the album was recorded and how clear and precise the overall soundscape is. So I enjoy the sound of the record, I just didn't feel like it had a lot of power to it. Within that sound and within that melodic drive that this record has, I felt like there were three elements that really allow the record to have this nature, and that is the orchestration aspect of the album, the drums, and the guitars. All three are doing something different within the album itself. I like the orchestrations within this record because I felt they were a component of the album, but they didn't become the album, or at least they didn't become the main piece of the puzzle as far as the sound is concerned. It creates atmosphere, it creates melody, it makes the songs feel a little bit more robust, a little bit more together, really complementing well the overall construction of the tracks and the overall design and idea that they had for each and every single song. So I like the orchestrations used in this fashion, not allowing them necessarily to jump into the forefront and to be the main beacon, the main focal point of where this record is going and how it's going to go there. So I really like the design behind it, I like how they use it, and I like the volume and the presence that it added and how much bigger the song sounds because of it. Next you have the drums. There's perhaps a few songs on this album that the drums really have power in them, but overall I felt like they were there, almost sitting in the back seat of the record, not necessarily taking a predominant role in terms of pushing the album forward or creating a little bit more heaviness, a little bit more strength, a little bit more intent within the songs themselves. So that was something that I felt was lacking perhaps a little bit, because when they came in on certain tracks with a little bit more of a drive, with a little bit more of trying to put a fingerprint onto the song, the tracks changed. They gained strength, they became bigger, they became heavier, they became a little bit more alive, if you will, and then you really realize how much it's missing on some other songs where the drums are kind of just threading water. On the guitar side, I love the guitar sound on this record. Definitely one of the highlights of this album is how the guitars sound, how they come across, and let's talk about the guitar solos. Incredible solos on this album, perhaps some of them a little bit short. They were so good that you kind of want them to go a little bit longer than what they did, but I always felt like the guitar solos sounded perfectly for the song that they were in, and they were placed in the right spot in order to make the songs bigger, in order to complement the tracks, in order to add value to the overall construction of the songs, and not just putting them there because you feel like every single song must have a solo. So I really like the guitar play. I like the sound, the dynamics that it gives to the tracks, the life that it brings into the songs, the momentum that it creates, and how it pushes these tracks forward. So everything surrounding the guitars on this album was really outstanding, and definitely one of the highlights of the experience of listening to the album from top to bottom. On top of it all, you have Willie Norton on vocals, and he has an amazing voice. Now, there are some guest vocalists in this album. Perhaps the best known one is Bjorn Strid, but he alone can carry an album like this. He has an incredible voice, incredible tone, incredible delivery, and I felt like he really can merge into different styles, into different approaches. Like I said, this is an album that lacks a little bit of power into its metal. It almost feels more like a melodic hard rock record, but his voice would fit into a perfect old school power metal album as much as it would fit into a melodic hard rock record. He just has a diversity of approach, and he has a great sound to his voice, a great tone, great delivery, great presence, really bringing the songs to life and really adding something to the tracks, adding a little bit more flair, a little bit more panache in terms of how the songs come across. I'm a huge fan of his vocals, and I thought he did a wonderful job, super consistent from top to bottom on this record. Overall, I enjoyed the album. I just felt like it lacked a little bit of passion, a little bit of drive, a little bit of intensity. There are ebbs and flows throughout this record. It's not a record that the first song sounds like the second and the second sounds like the third. It's not the case. There are some peaks and valleys, but overall the sensation that you get at the end of the record is that the album is very linear, that those ebbs and flows are just not enough to really create a break or to change your perception of the album from song to song. So this record really needed some jolts. Even if you're going to go down this more melodic path and have a little bit of a pattern to it, you still need a couple of tracks that kind of break the mold, that really reset the listening experience to the listener in order for the record to be a little bit more engaging. The way it plays out right now, it just becomes really hard to tell songs apart when you get to the end of it, because there's a sense of commonality that really spreads out throughout the record. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with This World Is Burning, opening track on the album. I really like the verses, very melodic with a little bit of bite coming out of the guitars. There's some layers to the vocals in and out, and that it creates some nice changes to how they're coming across. The chorus becomes a lot bigger. It has more sound, it has more volume, it has more presence, and the vocals are just outstanding, really becoming catchy and hooky in terms of how it's constructed and how the vocals come across. The solo brought the melody that the verses had, and it brought the power in terms of the volume that the chorus created. So I really like what they did with the solo on this track. It really felt like it completed the song and it merged the two different sides that this track has to offer overall. Next, Last of Our Kind. I felt like this track took me in a little bit of a different avenue. It still has a lot of similarities with This World Is Burning. There's still a lot of things that are working well together. The orchestration really mixes well with the sound of the guitars, creating this just wall of melody that's coming at you at every single turn. But the melody on this track felt a little bit more cinematic at times. It even had a little bit of a sci-fi vibe in terms of how it comes across. So the song, while having a lot of the same elements as, for example, The World Is Burning, it feels slightly different to your ears because of the atmosphere that it's creating. And that atmosphere is really being created by the orchestration, blending in with the guitars, and the melody that the two create sounds very unique within itself. And it really sets this track apart in terms of how it comes across, in terms of how it plays out. Another great track with another great solo. The solo section on this one is even better than the one in The World Is Burning. It just has a lot of strength, it has a lot of charisma, it has a lot of power, it really pushes itself, and it just feels a little bit more complete overall. Last but not least, Final Warning. The country style opening guitar riff was really strange, really different. I was not expecting it, but it blended well into the overall construction of this song and how the track then plays out from that point on. It's a track that starts to morph. It becomes a little bit of a prog power metal song all around. It doesn't have a real defined role. It doesn't have a real defined genre as far as the influences that drive it. So because of that, it becomes a little bit more dynamic. It becomes a little bit and I wouldn't go as far as to say volatile, but it becomes a little bit more interesting because you start to see a song that it's gaining some volume, that's gaining some presence. The drums are a little bit more thunderous in this track, so overall you feel like this is a more punchy kind of song that has a little bit more power, perhaps a track that sets itself apart from others because of the way the drums come in certain portions of the song. And when you put it all together, it becomes a very interesting track, both musically and vocally, because there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of dynamic movements. It's a song that just feels like it has places to go, and it really takes you there, and it really helps you in the journey within the track itself. So I really like this song, from how it's constructed to how it sounds and to how dynamic it is across both elements, musically and vocally. This is it with Neonfly, The Future Tonight. Let me know your thoughts on this album, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.